Nice to see you. It's great to be back home. Last weekend, Mitch Chitwood and Mitch is our director of operations, we were in India to take a look at a new mission partner that we were hoping to support. Before we send out any money anymore, we want to make sure that people are there and they're doing work and ministry. And we don't want to waste God's money on groups and people and stuff. And they're a long ways away. So sometimes when you send money, it's like really, it's kind of like a college student. What? So anyway, we had a great time. I prayed more than I ever have in my life. Because when you ride in a car in India, you pray a lot. They drive on the left side of the road, and there's a lot of them. There's a lot of cars, there's a lot of motorcycles, and again, the motorcycles are little, and they have usually 3 or 4 people on the motorcycle. And then they have bicycles and rickshaws and cows everywhere. So it is a crazy thing. And I'm just glad to be here. I have no idea. But we had a blast in central, the Mid-India Christian Mission, great group, and we look forward to partnering with them. And they're doing an amazing job. So Mid-India, you can Google that, look up those guys, and we look forward to letting you know more about that. But it's nice to be home. StoneBridge has been around for a long time. We're over 100 years. We got started by a young lady. She was a high school student who wanted to help her neighborhood in Irvington, Nebraska, because there was a lot of kids running around and they weren't going to church anywhere. And so she started a Bible study class for them on Sunday mornings. And that's how our church got started, because a bunch of kids started coming, and then people and parents, and then all of a sudden, they decided to form a church, and they did, called the Irvington Church of Christ. And they met in the little community of Irvington. Mostly we know Irvington now by the Irvington exit to the Walmart, right? And so that's kind of where we know Irvington, but they were tucked back in that little community that has been swallowed up by Omaha. Then in 1969, I believe, right around that area, that time, the church grew so much that they relocated to an area of 99th and 4th Street. And then it wasn't long after that, they built a bigger auditorium on that site, on that 4-acre site there. And it turned out to be an incredible location because they decided to build 680, and there was an exit right to our property. It was an incredible opportunity. And the church really did great and flourished. And then in 2006, we moved out here on this location. So almost 10 years ago, I can't believe we've been in this building for 10 years. And again, our church has continued to grow and expand. And today, for the first time, we have our grand opening. And I want to welcome those of you who are worshiping in Millard right now. That's so awesome that you're there. And we are goosebumpy here about the whole deal. And just so you know, the multi-site thing didn't work because there's a lot of people still here. And we're in trouble, but it's great. So we look forward to celebrating with them, and we're glad that you're here. And so thousands of people, as a result of being having a church that was started by a young lady, have found their way back to God. Many of you have found your way back to God through the ministry and the life of this church. Maybe it was at that 4th Street campus and where you wandered in there one time and you came to know Jesus and found your way back to God. Many of you, as a result of us being out on this campus here, have done the same thing, and you were baptized here and have made steps towards Christ. And we're excited again to open up the campus in Millard and do all that kind of stuff. But a lot of us have, maybe it wasn't the first time we found God, but it was But we had drifted for whatever reason. We liked, when we were a kid, we went to church and we liked Jesus a lot. But then things kind of happened. And mom and dad weren't really into it, and they would just drop us off. Or maybe it was grandpa and grandma that ended up bringing us. But we didn't get much support at home. And so by our teenage years, we just lost interest in church. We didn't think that we would end up away from God, but we just did. There is in our hearts this longing to be connected to somebody, to love. And there's a longing in our heart that's just there. It comes out in our art. It comes out in our music. It comes out in movies. We want to be, right? There's this longing in our soul. And so, in fact, here's some song, just kind of song stuff that lets you know that this is just in us. Let's hear. I was looking for love in all the wrong places, looking Some of you relate to those songs, right? By the way, we're looking for a worship pastor. Bono's still thinking about it, so we're pretty excited. But we haven't found. Many of us haven't found. In fact, we could have played We Can't Get No Satisfaction. We are always looking for and longing for something more. Maybe you know of Glenn Wolfe, probably not, but he holds the record for the most marriages in the United States. 29. 29. Now, a little sidebar, he's also a Baptist minister. So I don't know exactly what that means. But think about this. Glenn was longing for love. And he did not stop at 4. Right? You think like after your 4th one, you're like, maybe it's me. I don't know. He didn't even stop after 20. He just kept looking. His longest lasted 7 years, his shortest 19 days. Relationships are hard, right? You're maybe single and you're dating some guy and he kind of messes with you and you get dumped and you say something like this: I hate men. I hate all men. But your girlfriends invite you to Rednecks and there's a cute guy there that says, you want to dance? And you're back in. I'm in, baby. Here we go. Maybe you have some good friends that, mess with you and, and it just gets bad, but it doesn't take you long before you find some other friends. We just have this longing, right, for relationship, a longing somewhere placed in us to be loved. We also long for purpose. Think back when you were a kid and you're maybe 5 or 6, maybe even before that, but when you were 5 or 6 years old, if somebody says, what do you want to be when you grow up? You would have an answer. I want to be a farmer. I'd like to be an astronaut. I'd like policeman or fireman, a teacher. And think about that. You're 5. You don't have a job. You don't have any bills. You don't have, right? You're 5. You won't even have, but there's something in your heart already that says, I bet there's something more out there than being 5. A 5-year-old doesn't want to stay 5. Now, most parents want their kids to stay 5 because that's pretty manageable. But that would be bad, right? If when they're 25, they're still at home. Oh, sorry about it. There might be, so maybe they're still at home at 25, but if they're acting like 5, we go, this is a problem. And so even a 5-year-old knows there's probably going to be a purpose for my life than just being a kindergartner. We have this desire inside of us for purpose. Rick Warren wrote the book, The Purpose-Driven Life, and it was an incredible book. Our church even studied that. We went through message series on it in 2003. The Purpose-Driven Life had sold 500,000 copies and awarded the Gold Book Award. 2 months later, it crossed the 1 million threshold. And in 2005, it was awarded the Double Diamond Award for sales exceeding 20 million. It remains the best-selling hardcover nonfiction book in history. It is the second most translated book in the world next to the Bible. We long for purpose. We also long for meaning. There's a quest for something bigger in our lives. We want to answer the questions of, why am I here? And why am I breathing air? And why do bad things happen? And why am I in so much pain? Suffering oftentimes leads us to question God, and if there is one, because it seems like there's so many things that are unfair. And by the way, when there is injustice and when there is suffering, God feels that as well. I think that because those feelings that we have of when there's injustice and when there's suffering, those feelings come from God. We're going to take a look at, for the next 5 weekends, probably the most famous story ever written in literature. It's an incredible story that Jesus tells. And it's found in Luke chapter 15. We're going to read a portion of it today, not a real long section. But I would encourage you, if you can get your Bibles out and check out Luke chapter 15. The whole chapter is worth your time taking a look at. Luke 15, 11 through 16. To illustrate the point further, so Jesus has been talking to him about this already, but he's going to crush it right now, right? A man had 2 sons. Younger son told his father, I want my share of your estate now, before you die. So his father agreed to divide his wealth between his sons. And a few days later, his younger son packed all his belongings and moved to a distant land, and there he wasted all his money in wild living. About the time his money ran out, a great famine swept over the land. He began to starve, and he persuaded a local farmer to hire him, and the man sent him into his field to feed the pigs. The young man became so hungry that even the pods he was feeding the pigs looked good to him, but no one gave him anything. Here's a story of a dad and his boys. It's a story about a boy who's looking for love and looking for purpose and looking for meaning, but he's looking for it in the wrong places. The son asked for his inheritance, and in the first century, for the Middle Eastern culture, this was as bad of an insult that you could give your dad. I'd like my money now, and I wish you were dead. See, a son was supposed to take care of his father in his old age, so basically he was saying, I'm not even going to do that for you. I don't even respect you that much. So I don't care if you live or die, but I would like my money now. Because there's something more than this life I'm living. And I'm pretty sure I'm not going to find love, and I'm pretty sure I'm not going to find meaning, and I'm not going to find purpose at home. I need to get out of here. And I think that's a normal feeling for us. Longing for more, a desire there. The longing for love and purpose and making sense out of life, those come from God. Verse 13, he says he wasted all his money in wild living. We don't really know what that looked like, but it probably looked a lot like the movie The Hangover. I didn't know, you may not know that, but that was a documentary for the prodigal son, basically. He going off and doing wild things. It was like him hitting the lottery. He had tons of money, and he had no job he had to go to and no parents he had to report to. It was a dream come true for this kid. All the money he needed and all the time for him to explore and do stuff. Now, before we get down on this kid for doing something stupid, we probably would have done the same thing, right? If we had a boatload of money, like we hit the lottery. Remember, it wasn't that long ago. The lottery was $bazillion and people are lined up and they were interviewing people on TV. And they asked this guy in line, what are you going to do if you win the lottery? And this is what he said, hookers and cocaine. There we go. You're an honest dude, right? But that's what he wanted to do with the boatload of money. Wild living. It does not take long for this boy to blow through the money. Adventure was over. Economy is bad. Verse 15 through 16, he persuaded a local farmer to hire him. So he begged the guy. And the guy sends him into the field to feed the pigs. And he was so hungry that even the food that he's feeding the pigs looked pretty good to him. That's pretty desperate. I mean, I don't know what pig slop necessarily tastes like, but I know you can't get it at Omaha Prime, right? Hey, I'd like the pig slop. What? We're not getting that. No, we don't serve that because that's disgusting. We might give it to our pigs, but we're not giving it to people. And the little phrase here that is interesting, I mean, not interesting, it is haunting. But no one gave him anything. No one gave him anything. No one around. His so-called friends that he had for a little while are gone now. Have you noticed that sometimes as long as you're buying the drinks, you got some friends? As long as you're paying for something, some people will show up. But as soon as your money runs out, if you're going through some hard time, you lose your job, it seems like they kind of disappear. All of a sudden, you think, well, where do they go? I thought we were friends. Nobody was giving him money, no government assistance, no food pantry from a church, nothing. And we're in a message series we're starting today called Finding Your Way Back to God. It's based on a book that John and Dave Ferguson wrote, and you can find that book online and read through it as we go through this message series. Found out that I played basketball against John Ferguson in college. I was going through some old stuff when I was in college and played basketball and flipping through, and there was pictures, and I recognized him, and I thought, that's Ferguson. And I was going to show you a picture, but the shorts are so short that it's pretty disturbing. Not his, but mine, actually, was bad. Their team was smart enough to put sweats on during the photo op, but ours wasn't that smart. I don't even know if we had sweats, actually. So, for some of you here today, this is a first step back for you to find your way back to God. And you're here at one of our campuses just now, and you're not quite sure how you ended up here, but you did. Maybe you drove by, maybe you just moved in, and you're looking for something to connect you to something. Maybe you got a postcard that invited you here, but you're here. And you think about your spiritual journey. Maybe you've wandered. Probably it wasn't on purpose, but when you were a kid, church didn't make much sense to you. Mom and dad weren't into it, and you forgot about God for a little while. As you can see from this story, for which our longing for purpose and meaning and love comes from, all this time is there a way to find that? Notice that this boy in our story is longing for that, and he walked away from his dad, which represents God. If you read through the rest of the text, you find out that when this boy comes home, he simply walks home. He doesn't run home, he walks. And we do find that in that story that the father will run after us as we're coming home. This story is really our story. And eventually we're going to want to satisfy these God-giving longings for meaning and love and purpose in our lives. Will we go towards God or not? In the 17th century, Blaise Pascal had one of the greatest intellects in the history of Western civilization. He grew up knowing about God, but really not knowing him very well. And then in the middle of a night one time, he had a profound experience with God. It changed his heart. In a moment, ignited Pascal's passion to help other people find their way back to God. Pascal began to challenge other intellectuals to wager on God. He would dare them to step into the belief that God was real. He just would ask them to pretend as if God was real. Make a bet that there is a God who loves you, he said. If you're right, you have everything to gain, but if you're wrong, you lose nothing, right? Because if God's not real, it's no big deal. You get what you get at the end. But if he is real, and if you believe in him, you gain everything. So he says, just make a bet that God is real. Let's just kind of pretend that he is. It's a bit of a gamble, but there's a big payoff at the end. So here's the risk we're going to ask you to take for the next 30 days. We want you to pray to God. Now, you may not do much praying. You might not even do any praying. And if that's the case, then that's probably going to be weird for you. It probably will seem a little awkward. But I'm just going to ask you to bet on that. Just pray as if God is real. Now, for others, prayer might be more of a regular part of your life, but maybe it's just routine, and you just say the same prayer over and over again. The "now I lay me down to sleep" thing, or rub-a-dub-dub, thanks for the grub. You just have your same prayers that you pray, and it bounces off the ceiling, basically. And it's just mostly ritual. Maybe, so it doesn't, what I'm going to ask you to do is pray as if God is real for the next 30 days. That's it. That's all your homework assignment is. So here's the first prayer. In fact, I'm going to give you the prayer to pray, all right? And here's what I'm going to ask everybody here. Here's the prayer. God, if you're real, make yourself real to me. It's that. God, if you're real, make yourself real to me. Awaken in me the ability to see that you are what is missing in my life. Now, some of you are going to have to pretend. You're going to have to say, God, if you're real, right? Make yourself real to me. And then could you awaken in me, right, what is missing in my life? You might want to write that down, but I'd just say, God, if you're real, make yourself real to me. That's it. That's all you have to pray for the next 30 days, just once a day. And what do you have to lose? Can you imagine what it would be like if you did not have to run after love anymore? If you did not have to constantly be looking for meaning and purpose in your life? That if after 30 days you would have found your way back to God and He filled up those things in your life that you have been pursuing and running after. Because you're not going to find, in fact, you know this, you're not going to find it where you've been looking. It's just not there. The boy didn't find meaning and purpose at a party. He did not find love in all the relationships that he had. It wasn't there. Can you imagine what it would be like? Maybe not. Maybe you can't imagine. But would you be open for just a month to pray the prayer, God, if you're real, make yourself real to me. Now, that's your assignment. That's all you got to do. All right? Let's pray. And I know you're real. And you have revealed yourself to me over and over and over again. I saw it a lot this week. In the faces, the lives of people thousands of miles away from here. In little villages of people who have very, very little. And in large cities in India where there's a lot of affluence. But they've stepped away into something incredible. I want to pray for my friends there today. But there are some folks here today that maybe drifted a little bit from you, started probably in high school or college. But now, for whatever reason, you've awakened in their heart something for something more. We haven't found it in the success of a career or in the arms of a lover. And we just wonder, could there be something more? And so here today, maybe would be the day in which we would at least do an inventory of our life, at least at this moment just stop and honestly go, I'm not getting any answers to the questions I'm asking, and And God, if you're real, would you make yourself real to me right now? And that's our prayer.